15 years after the original Enchanted hit our screens, Amy Adams is back with Disenchanted on Disney+. Everyone's favorite cartoon princess made flesh is still searching for her happily ever after. And we've been searching for all those magical details and Easter eggs you might have missed. Spoilers ahead. A major plot point in the movie involves Giselle transforming her new suburban home of Monroeville into a stereotypical fairy tale town, complete with dancing villagers, medieval markets, and even the occasional giant. You probably recognize a lot of the tropes they're making fun of in these scenes. But did you notice all the sneaky puns in the background? The puns themselves are not subtle, but the placement is. The stores in the newly transformed Monroeville all have names that riff on classic Disney movies. A lot of them go by so fast it's hard to catch them, but don't worry, we've spent a lot of time freeze framing so you don't have to. You got a grocer called A Whole Food World, a reference to the iconic song A Whole New World from 1993's Aladdin. You've got a bookstore called Beauty and the Book, which obviously references Beauty and the Beast. There's a store called Smee's Cheese, a callback to Mr. Smee from Peter Pan. Plus, there's Mary Popover's Bakery, Bibbidi Boppity Butchers, and Painting on the Wall, and even Lemire's Candleworks. 100 Disney points if you made all those connections. You might not have spotted all those puntastic stores, because they're in the background of a big song and dance number featuring Giselle and the townspeople. The song is called Fairytale Life, and it's all about how their town is a swell place to live. Apart from the trolls and dragons, obviously. And if you listen closely to the lyrics of the song, you might notice how a few more sneaky references to Disney canon and to fairy tales in general are there. The song mentions Fantasia, a callback to the concert film from the 1940s starring Mickey Mouse and a bunch of hippos and tutus. The townspeople quote, "Be our guest," one of the most enduring bangers from Beauty and the Beast. And there's even a mention of the Brothers Grimm, the German academics who first collected iconic folk tales like Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, and Snow White in the form we know today. Nice to see Disney giving a shout out to the guys they built their whole empire on. And that's not even half of the sly background references. As Giselle makes herself at home in her new fairy tale town, she goes to a dress shop to buy some new clothes for herself and her stepdaughter Morgan. And if you look closely at what's on sale in this old-fashioned fashion boutique, you can see a few dresses hanging up that echo the designs of famous Disney outfits. There's a dress modeled on Belle's yellow ball gown from Beauty and the Beast, and a variation from Snow White's outfit from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Disney's very first animated feature film from way back in 1937. We didn't see any glass slippers though. Back in Enchanted, Morgan was a live-eyed little girl who loved princesses and all that fairy tale stuff. Now a teenager, she's grown out of that storybook nonsense, and a lot of Disenchanted is about her struggle to relate to Giselle, who is still very much a cartoon princess at heart. So it's only natural that Morgan should get her own song. Perfect, where she tells us what's going on inside her head. It's this movie's version of a traditional Disney musical trope. The, quote, "I want" song, usually sung by the female heroine. Classic examples include Part of Your World from The Little Mermaid, Just Around the River Bend from Pocahontas, and Reflection from Mulan. Yeah, they really want you to know that this is a Disney production. The movie isn't just full of callbacks and references to the history of Disney and fairy tales, though. It also has a few cute callbacks to the original Enchanted from 2007. Remember the beginning of the movie where Giselle gets chased by a troll? Well, he's back. Not only that, he seems to be friendly now, hanging out with Nancy and Edward at their palace in Andalasia. I wonder what his big redemption arc was. Can't wait to find out when he gets his own Disney Plus limited series in 2023. Everybody loves a twist on a movie studio logo. It's a fun way to start your movie and get the audience immersed in your world. Back at the beginning of the original Enchanted, they put in a cute riff on the Disney Castle logo, zooming in to reveal the animated storybook. And there's a similar gag in Disenchanted, with a snappy match cut transforming the famous Disney Castle into Nancy and Edward's palace in Andalasia. And on top of that callback, for all the scenes set in Andalasia, Disenchanted uses the same animation style that was used in Enchanted. These sections had to be outsourced because Disney doesn't really do traditional animation anymore, and the style is a tribute to the old cell animation used in classic Disney pictures, but with a modern twist, which pretty much sums up the Enchanted movies. This one's pretty neat. Here's another callback from the original Enchanted. Remember in the first film when Giselle goes to the window of Robert's apartment and sings her magical animal call so that the pigeons, rats, and cockroaches could come help her clean up? Well, at the start of Disenchanted, as she's preparing to leave that apartment, Giselle sings the same magical animal call out the window, and the sequences of shots and cuts exactly matches the equivalent scene from the first movie. When Giselle, Robert, and Morgan first arrive in their new house in Monroeville, it's kind of a fixer-upper, and the place is full of construction workers and gardeners. 3 of those gardeners are dressed in red, green, and blue. Why is that notable? Well, in a Disney movie, seeing 3 women dressed in red, green, and blue is clearly going to remind you of Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather, the 3 good fairies from the 1959 classic, Sleeping Beauty. And what do you know? When the town is transformed, those 3 gardeners are transformed into, you guessed it, a fairies. Setups and payoffs, baby. You gotta love them. A big part of the first Enchanted is Giselle coming to terms with the fact that real life isn't a fairy tale. And even though she has grown as a person between that movie and the sequel, she's still ultimately a cartoon character in a human body. So the problem hasn't gone away. She's still looking for a quote, happily ever after that may not truly exist. In fact, in some ways, she's refused to grow up, continuing to try to solve all her problems with storybook solutions and fairy tale logic. Hey, she's a fairy tale princess, man. You gotta cut her some slack. But that habit of trying to wish away problems does come back to bite her in Disenchanted, and everybody else in the blast radius. It just shows that the filmmakers care about continuity of character, because this is definitely the same Giselle we remember from the first movie. When Giselle wishes that Monroeville was more like a fairy tale, it's not just the humans who transform into storybook stereotypes. Everything gets a magical makeover, including the appliances in her kitchen. Now they talk and dance. Classic Disney stuff, man. And if you look at the way the appliances are animated, it's pretty obvious that the style is meant to invoke the likes of Mrs. Potts, Lumiere, and Cogsworth from Beauty and the Beast. Hey, if you're gonna do animated kitchen appliances, why wouldn't you reference the best? Of course, Beauty and the Beast isn't the only Disney movie where the furniture, tools, and appliances come to life. Giselle also has a walking broomstick that can do the sweeping for her. And is it just me, or does that broomstick in Disenchanted look kind of familiar? Yeah, it's a subtle visual callback to the army of walking brooms that nearly drowned Mickey Mouse back in Fantasia. At least the one in Disenchanted seems a bit less chaotic. One fun aspect of Disenchanted is that as the town becomes more like a fairy tale, the main cast and the supporting cast start taking on tropes and qualities of fairy tale characters. But there's a twist. You might think Giselle would fit in perfectly as herself, but she starts to change too. Because she and Morgan have been butting heads, cute naive Giselle starts to become a very different sort of fairy tale archetype. The wicked stepmother. That trope is probably most familiar from Disney's Cinderella, but it also goes way back to much older folktales, including stories like Hansel and Gretel. And I've gotta say, I kinda feel bad for any stepmoms watching. Not all stepmoms are wicked. Not all stepmoms lock their stepchildren in the attic. We need to stop the stigma. Just to add to the whole wicked stepmother motif, lovable chipmunk Pip undergoes a transformation of his own. He becomes a fat, evil cat, which can only be a callback to the delightfully malevolent cat Lucifer in Cinderella. Just look at that guy. Pure evil. Maybe that's just cats for you. There have been a lot of stories over the years where the curses, spell, riddles, and magical doodads could really use some instructions to stop people getting into trouble. Luckily, the magical wishing wand in Disenchanted has clearly been designed with more care than these things usually are, because for one reason, it comes with a living scroll that patiently explains how wishes work. The scroll is a fun character, as well as providing useful exposition. He also gives us a few more fun callbacks to Disney classics. When trying to work out the extent of Giselle's magical mistake, he asks if she's seen a flower dropping petals or a clock counting down to midnight. A flower dropping petals, eh? Is that another Beauty and the Beast reference? That was rhetorical. It definitely is. And a clock counting down to midnight? Wasn't that a big part of Cinderella? Also rhetorical. Okay, this one is a real deep cut, and probably the kind of thing you would only notice if you spent most of your childhood watching Disney's Aladdin on repeat. Hey, it was the 90s, man. It was a different time. We didn't even have TikTok. Anyways, while Giselle is walking through the market in Monroe-lasia, looking for a spell to help her out, you can hear various market sellers shouting in the background. One guy shouts that he is selling sugar dates, figs, and pistachio. And, if you remember a similar market scene from the aforementioned Aladdin... Yeah, sorry, that was a real nerdy thing to pick up on, even by ScreenRant standards. Giselle really starts to settle into the evil stepmother role. She locks poor Morgan in her attic room and forbids her from going to the ball. So far, so Cinderella. But you'll notice that the attic room is at the very top of a tall tower. Sound familiar? You're probably thinking of the Maiden in the Tower storytelling trope, which goes back through hundreds of years of folk tales. The most famous one is that of Rapunzel, which Disney memorably adapted into its 50th animated film, Tangled, in 2010. Of course, Morgan doesn't have super long hair, but she does tie together a bunch of blankets to escape her tower, in a much similar way that Rapunzel uses her hair as a rope ladder. Another fairy tale trope ticked off the list, for those keeping score. Giselle eventually decides that she wants to be the evil queen of Monroe-lasia, taking over from Maya Rudolph's current evil queen, Malvina. And naturally, once you decide you want to be an evil queen, you can't just walk everywhere. You need to travel with style. You need a slick new set of wheels. Interestingly, Giselle settles on a white coach, drawn by white horses. Does that remind you of anything? It should. It's modeled on the magical coach that Cinderella's fairy godmother creates from a humble pumpkin and a few mice. What could it mean? Is it a subconscious hint that deep down, Giselle still sees herself as a fairy tale heroine rather than as a villainess? Or is it just a memorable design for a coach? Sound off in the comments. As the rivalry between Giselle and Malvina heats up, Amy Adams and Maya Rudolph get to share a duet in which both would-be evil queens work overtime to out-sass each other. The song is a fiery tango called Batter, and there are a couple notable things about it. Number one, it's kind of a bop. And number two, the lyrics are full of references to fairy tales and Disney movies. We get shout-outs to Alice in Wonderland, Jack and the Beanstalk, Maleficent, Cruella de Vil, and, The Wizard of Oz, which isn't really a fairy tale. It's about a young girl who gets transported to a magical world and fights a witch, so we'll allow it. During that Batter song, we see Malvina looking through her various secret cupboards and supply closets trying to find some sort of evil spell that she can use to take down Giselle. It's a blink and you'll miss it moment, but we spotted a few familiar items in there. There's a spinning wheel, much like the one in Sleeping Beauty. There's a flower in a jar, another reference to Beauty and the Beast. There's a poisoned apple, which references Snow White and the original Enchanted. And there's even a drink me potion, like the one Alice chugs down in Alice in Wonderland. I hope she has a license for all that stuff, or a strong lock on those closets. We don't spend that much time in Andalasia and Disenchanted, but there are a few scenes set in Giselle's old fairy tale homeland. And once again, there are some fun background details to spot, as well as the newly friendly troll that we mentioned before. You may also have noticed that King Edward and Queen Nancy have a miniature fairy friend flying around them. She's not named, but she looks suspiciously similar to Tinkerbell, the grumpy pixie pal from Peter Pan. Maybe a cousin, or is that offensive to pixies? Fans of the delightfully dumb Edward, played once again by James Marsden, and his wife Nancy, played by a returning Idina Menzel, will be glad to know that the king and queen of Andalasia get some important stuff to do in the new movie. Not only does Idina Menzel get an opportunity to show off her pipes with a big musical number called Love Power, but she actually gets an important plot function too. Early in the movie, it's mentioned that Edward and Nancy are the godparents of Giselle and Robert's new baby daughter Sophia, but later in the movie, when things are really starting to go to hell, Nancy also becomes kind of a mentor figure to Morgan, helping her figure out how to save the day. You could even say that Nancy becomes Morgan's fairy godmother. Yeah, there's a lot of Cinderella in the mix in this movie. And here's some more Cinderella for you. The evil queen Malvina has a son called Tyson, who doesn't really get much to do, apart from stand around and look pretty. But he does get a nifty outfit after the town is transformed by Giselle's wish. Nifty and kind of familiar. That white jacket, his outfit, man, it's gotta be based on Prince Charming's outfit from Cinderella, right? Or maybe I'm starting to lose my mind after spending 3 straight days freeze-framing Disenchanted. Or maybe both. I have no idea. One fun aspect of Giselle's transformation into a wicked stepmother, and later into a full-blown evil queen, is that she's still recognizably herself in a lot of ways. She still speaks in a very sickly, sweet way. She still believes strongly in the power of baking. And she still has a special connection with animals. Throughout Enchanted and Disenchanted, Giselle talks to animals, enlisting their help with cleaning, and generally seems to have woodland creatures following her wherever she goes. And when she's evil in the climax of Disenchanted, she throws around spells that transforms objects, and even other spells, into animals, both birds and butterflies. Things start to get really crazy at the end of Disenchanted, with the real world sucking the magic out of Andalasia and risking destroying the magic cartoon kingdom forever. One way that the chaos manifests is an attack of evil magical thorns, which snake their way up from Andalasia and starts wrapping themselves around the town hall where Giselle and Malvina are having their big climactic smackdown. Magical thorns rising and wrapping around buildings, stopping handsome princes from coming to the rescue? Remind you of anything? For our final entry, let's have a look behind the scenes. A lot of the same cast and crew from Enchanted have returned to make Disenchanted, including two very important figures. Composers Alan Menken and Steven Schwartz are back to deliver toe-tapping musical numbers. Of course, you'll recognize their name from the first movie, but Disney heads will also recognize the name Alan Menken, because that guy is a bona fide House of Mouse legend. He worked on the scores for a bunch of Disney Renaissance pictures, including The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and Beauty and the Beast, often in collaboration with the late great Howard Ashman. If there's a song you remember fondly from that period, Alan Menken probably helped write it. And hey, if you're making a love letter to Disney fairy tales, who else would you call to do the tunes? 15 years is a pretty big gap for a sequel by Disney standards. So which other old Disney classics could benefit from a legacy sequel? The Parent Trap 35 years later? Princess Diaries 2049, Freaky Friday 2, Freaky Saturday? Seriously, Disney, call me, I've got hundreds of these.